It is time to talk about Jimmy Butler. Everyone's been awaiting it. We haven't really talked about Jimmy Butler on this podcast at all this year. Jimmy Butler, Grant, he is basically requested or demanded a trade now. He says he doesn't think he can recapture the joy of playing while still in Miami. Point blank. That's one of those things we've talked a lot about. Well, do exchanges convey differently from text to when you actually hear or watch them? Not this one. It was it was awkward AF. Did you watch it? The clip?
Yeah, I have seen this one.
That dead silence was just like
it felt almost performative, like a touch of it, but partly because it's Jimmy Butler. Like, you know, he does lay it on thick sometimes, I think, in his messaging.
Now, here's my question. He has now ESPN Shamsharani came out with a report immediately after that press conference. He would prefer to be elsewhere, but Butler reportedly doesn't necessarily care where. What you don't really see is that a reflection of him just wanting to cause maximum chaos or a reflection of his market? Because initially, when it wasn't kind of official and his agent was all upset, there was the Mavs, the Suns, the Warriors, and the Rockets were his list of preferred teams. And we've kind of gotten confirmation that like two of those teams just wouldn't even be interested. It'd be the Dubs or the Suns. And then the Suns need Bradley Beal to waive his no trade clause and the Heat to maybe have like their front office to have like a bunch of aneurysms. So I'm just like, what is your read on that? But did he actually tell us where he wants to go? His hair was lime green. So is this a Celtics situation or an alternative Minnesota Timberwolves jersey situation? What's your read on this?
There's some that color is in some of the Pelicans, like Mardi Gras jerseys too. So that was where my mind went.
That's not close enough to the Spurs Fiesta, like green, blue, right?
There's somebody else has like a weird green alternate that I can't think of now. I don't know. Bulls St. Patrick's Day
on St. Patty's Day years ago.
Yeah,
it's behind me.
Yeah, there it is.
Anyone watching? There it is.
Day, he wants to be on the Knicks. So my first thought was like, are we finding players still for trade requests? Is that not allowed? Because this was deliberately falling short of I want to be traded. It was I need to go somewhere where I can find my joy. And they said, is that here? I forget who was asking him. And he said, I don't know, or it's probably not. So it's just like, I do think I'm cynical. This felt like a calculated, I'm going to say as much as I possibly can about how unhappy I am and how much I want to be traded without doing whatever it takes to get over the line of this was a trade request that I can get fined for. In addition to all the other stuff you're saying about like, you know, opening up the market.
It was adjacent to having Rachel Nichols on site for the interview, like immediately after the tour de force. Like it was that level of calculated. There was a report that the Heat might suspend him for it, but they've since announced that they won't, at least as of now, as we're recording this. Can you get fine? Like he was asked about it. And also he might at least we know what he put on his 2025 vision board or in his gratitude journal of need to be somewhere where I could recapture the joy. And it's not here.
I just want him to have some joy, you know, shouldn't we wish that for everybody?
Do you think this was inevitable, right? Because he let his camp, whether they denied or not, let the breadcrumbs kind of fall out. And then Pat Riley probably had talks with the teams on the list or various teams, didn't like the offers, said they weren't going to trade him. And it was almost just a dare saying, you're going to have to make this ugly on your end. I find that interesting because I don't think Miami wins here by letting it get, like, if anything, Jimmy Butler's trade value right now is less, right, than Jimmy Butler's trade value, like at the start of the season, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. Just because if he's further along in the contract and now
you're not trading him on your terms is basically where I'm getting at.
I think that's right. Does part of you, I think it's probably counterproductive for Riley to take like the hard line and come out before this and say, we're not trading him. Part of me like enjoys management being like, you sign a contract, we're in charge. Like you don't get somewhere else unless we say so. I like, and a lot of the reporting I read today and speculation was just kind of like Riley's the only executive in the league that can do this because like he's never going to be stripped of, like he's just in a position where he can be a hard liner like this and like, yeah, you want to walk like that. You're going to sit here and be miserable for several months. It's probably not smart
to see Sam Presti try to do that. I don't know why, but could you even envision him acting like I
could do it in a way that was like, oh, it seems right. That's a way to play it, you know, or that's a reaction. But does any part of you, I don't know. It's probably not a good instinct, but I do kind of like it when the party that's actually in charge, like contractually, says, no, Like this is, you don't get to just be difficult and get what you want. You know what this is? This is the parenting side where it's like, I am not going to cave to your tantrums, to your irrational behavior. You can make this as hard as you want, but I'm still in charge and I'm going to cling to that illusion for as long as possible, probably to my detriment, which I think maps pretty perfectly onto what the Heat are doing right now in the position of authority.
Yeah, I mean, this is just tough because he still intends to decline his $52.4 million player option. I think a lot of teams might view that, or I would say a lot of people probably view that as a bad thing.
Mhm.
If you're a team, you might actually appreciate that because, he's willing to get paid less for a longer time. He's not getting, and if he does, it'll be a 2-year thing. I mean, like, you're not, I just can't see based off what the market's going to be, unless that's why Brooklyn is pearl clutching cap space at the moment. We want Jimmy Butler on this team. No, they don't. So where are you going? Detroit could maybe get cap space, or Washington. No. So I'm fascinated because I think Miami drawing the hardline stance is right, but it's also their fault that they kind of got here, because now it's also that Terry Rozier trade is still one of the most inexplicable trades in recent memory, because you're out a first round pick in 2027 now. So what are you valuing back? Do you just think you're going to be good enough so you trade Jimmy Butler for whatever? And depending on what's coming back, could you make the case from Miami's side, before we even talk about teams that might be interested, could you make the case that they're just like better off daring his money to come off the books then?
This is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. So normally, and I do this more than you, I would say you got to do something because he can walk. And you always correctly say, well, you can sign and trade. It's not like you hit this, the contract expires and you have no recourse as the Heat.
Right.
Not really true. I'm wondering if the new CBA is such that, and the example recently is Paul George and the Clippers, because I said, like, why wouldn't you preserve the asset? Why wouldn't you just pay him whatever you needed to pay him and then trade him? Because you get something instead of letting him walk. Because what are you going to do with that money? I wonder or do you think now, with teams, with just the new rules, nobody's really totally figured out how to like win the game with the new current rules. And I wonder if you think the value of just letting a guy walk, or is there now value? Because you can be like, you just want the clean books, because there's nothing worse now than being stuck on money that's like bad to like moderately bad, because it just, inflexibility is everywhere. The rules, it's harder to make trades just with aggregation, and can't take back more than you sent. All this other stuff, depending on which apron you're in. I wonder if you think maybe now there's increased value in the Heat saying, for example, you will stay here the rest of the year. You can opt out and you can leave, and we'll be happy to move on without having taken back money we maybe didn't want in a trade, and a lot of it, because this is $50 million. And if that's true, does that revive free agency, which has been a complaint everybody's had, is like, nobody moves in free agency anymore. All these extensions, all these whatevers, all these trades. Do you see the connection there, where it's like, if suddenly teams are willing to let guys walk and hit free agency, they're not afraid of that. I do think it's possible that we see a return to, where's Jimmy Butler going to sign, or where's whoever's next year. Like, I think those two things might be linked.
That's an interesting. I hadn't thought about it through that lens, and you might be right, because did we kind of see this on smaller, different scales, where Washington probably could have gotten a second round pick or two for Tyus Jones and made the active decision to say, we'll let him walk we're better off having him for the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. And then even with Paul George and the Clippers, they kind of they knew he wasn't signing the extension that they offered him, and they knew what he wanted, and they kept him anyway. And then even the offer, like the most aggressive offers, came from Denver and Golden State, apparently, to get him via sign and trade, aside from the Sixers. They made the decision to let him walk for nothing because they didn't want some of that money on the books. And you could still go back, and does that still make the most amount of sense? I had not thought about it that way, but I guess it's all relative to, what you're going to get back. And I guess what you're saying, though, to actually be less generalized about the way I'm responding to it is, well, previously you would have said, well, just get what you can for a player you're going to leave. But now if get what you can means throw away first round picks and money on our books beyond even Jimmy Butler's contract, why do it? And maybe that flexibility they're not going to do anything with that additional flexibility. And will they even have it, depending on, they're paying Terry Rozier and they have Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, but it's, well, we didn't hamstring ourselves with players we didn't want. And okay, we punted on like a first round. And that's the other thing though, because you mentioned before we started recording this, that the Heat want, if they make a trade with the Dubs, they want Jonathan Kuminga back in any deal. Like, what is the team that is then going to come in with, because what is Jimmy Butler's value? And it will vary by team, but which team should be the most desperate to get Jimmy Butler that actually has more? Because you could argue that, yes, the Suns should be desperate to get Jimmy Butler, but that's the exact type of package where it's, what is my, I still tend to romanticize those distant first round picks. So if you're going to get a 2031 Phoenix first round pick and you have to take on Bradley Beal, I might consider it as rather than go the route of letting Jimmy Butler's money come off. But I hadn't thought of what you were saying, and I think you might be right. And does that stance, though, even if it doesn't directly contribute to the return of free agency, do we see, like, is it a better negotiating position for the Heat to where, oh, it really looks like they're going to keep him, and we just saw the Clippers do this? Does that make other teams who really want him or quote unquote need him more inclined to up their offer?
I think in general, anytime teams do this all the time, they project, like they try to drive up offers by saying we love this guy or we're not going to trade him, just because that conveys, well, you're really going to have to blow us away because we're not going to take, we're not even interested. It's just a pretty standard negotiating thing. I do think that with teams specifically like Miami, now my like theory, if it's even rises to that, it I think doesn't apply universally. Like, it works in Miami. It might work. Look at the teams that we're talking about. The Clippers did it. That's a free agent destination. LA. All right. Like, Miami can do it. Miami's going to be a free agent destination. Like Memphis and New Orleans, if you say, we'll just let them walk, we don't need it. Like, that's less of a good idea, because your ability to do something with your flexibility and the cash you're saving or whatever in free agency just now isn't what it is for these big market teams that free agents want to go to. But I think it does give Miami negotiating leverage. And I think specifically Miami probably has reason to believe the value, like flexibility and not having bad money, is better for Miami than it is for a lot of other teams, because of what it can expect to do in free agency. Like, flexibility just matters more if you have more opportunities to add talent through as many means as possible. And not every team is on equal footing that way. So, like, of the total revival of free agency, like, maybe I'm overstating it, but like in some isolated cases, I do think it's going to make more sense to just say, I don't want Bradley Beal and another year of that salary and other stuff for Butler. I would rather just have the ability to do what I want with and I don't want encumbrances, even if they come with sweeteners like distant picks.
Could that also bring about the return of, well, then we're just going to, maybe it doesn't bring about the return of free agency, but we see the reprioritization of getting back short-term contracts? Because you could also argue the mechanism to up the value of Jimmy Butler would be, well, if there are unsavory deals, and Bradley Beal would be one, but the Suns don't have the assets to attach. Is there another team where it's, oh, we're taking back this money we don't want, but like that was the difference between us getting 2 first-round picks and 1 first-round pick for Jimmy Butler?
Maybe. I think, like, to use the Beal example, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm not sure what my answer is to that. I just think, like, Beal being an example, teams that have the kinds of contracts that like the Heat would like to avoid getting back if they can, just to use this specific example, like and the Suns can't sweeten it with first unless they do your Ryan Dunn deal. But like, I don't think teams like that are going to have the sweeteners to like make it worthwhile to really tip the scales in favor of, we'll take this bad money. Because teams in that position, like, I don't know, it's hard to do this without more specific examples. It's just, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is increasingly the idea of just not taking back anything I don't want, regardless of what I might want that's coming with it, starts to have more appeal to me, like from the Heat's perspective. Like just, and this is coming from someone that, like, nothing makes me happier than throwing things away, because I feel like it simplifies my life. And so, like, if I were running a team, I would be constantly like, you want to leave? Great. I don't want anything back that's going to be clutter. Like, I might not be the best person to poll on the subject.
But this gets to the point, though, of, okay, so then let's start with the teams that were on his initial list. Mm-hmm. The Mavs are non-starter. We've talked already about the Rockets don't want to make a midseason trade, and they've also prioritize getting someone on their timeline, I kind of view them as a non-starter as well.
I would agree. I would agree.
The Suns, I view as a non-starter for the Heat as of right now. I honestly don't know if you got, I'm going to say the number 25 pick in this year's draft, a 2031 Suns pick, unprotected, and then Bradley Beal waives his no trade clause. That's like basically what their top. That's conceptually, by the way, because we're assuming they could get a first round pick for Ryan Dunn. Are you doing that trade as Miami?
I think so. Beal has next year and one more, or is it just next year?
He has a player option, but I'm assuming he's probably going to pick.
I don't want that contract. Like you just saw a team pay to get off of it. Like I don't want it. So yeah, I guess we're just talking theoretically because the offer you said, like you said, just the Suns can't do that.
To be clear, I would give up I'm trying to think of a team. I like used Boston. Like you could use Jaden Springer technically, but then you need to find a team and take on Jaden Springer because the money's all wonky. But like, I think I would give up a late first round pick for Ryan Dunn. I don't know if I'm kind of overstating that. So like, even one of these younger teams, like if the Jazz think they have a throwaway first round pick, like just go out there and get I don't know, but I don't think, based off what Miami's saying, their messaging would indicate that no, they don't want Bradley Beal's contract. But I would also say Bradley Beal is someone that could, in theory, play, and you don't own your first round. Like, you're not going to regain control of your draft, in theory, until after 2027. Like, you're not kind of out of those obligations. But they're probably, is Bradley Beal even going to waive his no trade clause to go to a worse team? Or in theory, what could be a worse team?
That's the thing. Like, there's so many barriers. So that leaves the Warriors, right? And that's the team where if you're Miami and you're being offered Kuminga, Wiggins, 2 firsts, a little bit more matching salary, you should do that if you're the Heat. Yeah. You should absolutely do that. And like, now, no question.
My counter would be, and this is coming as someone who proposed a more ambitious trade from the Warriors and way before these trade demands, if I'm giving up Jonathan Kuminga, I will give you this year's first round pick and we will figure out a way to make the money work. And that is it. That is not like Jimmy Butler has requested a trade. He's headed towards free agency. Like, that's where my offer's going to max out. Maybe they don't want to pay Jimmy Butler, but they also might not. Would we rather pay Jimmy Butler for the next 2 years, or do we want to pay Jonathan Kuminga for 4 years? That's an interesting discussion to have.
Right. Absolutely. And if you're the Heat, I was going to say, I think the fact that the Warriors are probably the only game in town means that now the Heat are weighing, we would like to have Butler's money off the books and no encumbrances against the type of offer you're talking about, where it might not be 2 firsts. It might need to, the Warriors can hardball it a little bit because there's no competition. So like there's certain things that just have to be in the deal. Kuminga seems like he's one of them, but like Wiggins also has to be in the deal. And if that's the case, like if you're the Heat, you should take that. You should take Wiggins and Kuminga and filler for Butler without picks. Like, I think so. The Warriors like could be in a position of advantage here, except that goes back to their side of it is like, do you want to rent Jimmy Butler and or then pay him $50 million a year for 2 more years? I don't know the answer to that. I lean towards no.
Jonathan Kuminga's had like 3 good games in a row, so I don't think that you could.
Wrong time to ask, right? Yeah. He's untouchable again.
Well, and also if the Heat are going to accept that type of offer, and I think this is the best spot to move on to at least one of the reports execs are wondering about a certain team, but are there just better suited trade partners then? Because the thing with that offer is, well, now we have to turn around and pay Jonathan Kuminga. Even if you like him, but now we have to pay him for, let's say, a minimum. I guess you could go the 3-year route, but part of the appeal would be, no, we want that deal to stretch out as like, you don't want to do what Houston did with Jalen Green, for instance, where he's basically a placeholder. It feels like there. So are there better teams suited? And one of the ones that was mentioned was execs told Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, they think the Nuggets should make a run at Jimmy Butler using Michael Porter Jr.'s deal. Now, Denver can only include, as of right now, 1 conditional first round pick in 2031. Butler makes $48.8 million this year. So the deal would basically have to be MPJ, Najee, and Saric for Jimmy Butler and Alec Burks. And you could expand that, include a bunch of different teams. And if the Heat like one of the youngsters, maybe Denver's willing to give up Christian Brown. I think they wouldn't, but like if they were willing to give up Julian Strother, you could expand it. Is there a team to take on Saric or Najee? Or I don't think they would give up Peyton Watson, but like that would be a conversation to have. I have other teams I want to throw at you, but do you view this as, if you're from whose side? Let's start from Denver's side, because I think it's always easy for us to say Miami will say no.
Yeah.
If you're Denver, it's costing you, I'm going to say it costs you one of your youngsters that's not Christian Brown, your only first round pick, MPJ, but you're also getting off Saric and Najee, which would be part of the value for you. Are you ultimately making that deal?
I think I am. And that might have to do with I think a feature of it might be being off MPJ's deal. Like you probably replace it with Butler's, but maybe you don't. And so if what you get out of this is a title run with Butler this year, and then you have slightly cleaner books with MPJ not being on them anymore, you could frame that as like a decent like damage control aspect of the trade, which has some favorable sides to it. I think I do it. Where are you on it? You don't like it?
I guess I'd probably do it because you're getting off 2 deals that in retrospect, at least one of them we knew in the moment was charged, never should have been given out in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't view, is Michael Porter Jr. on his contract a more precarious asset than Jimmy Butler on his next contract is what this would come down to, because the spacing stuff would worry me. But like, if there's any offense that could just figure out how to be top 5 while lowering their 3-point volume,
Right.
still, it's the one that has the greatest player alive in Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
I wonder, it's sort of, I wouldn't even say optimizes, it increases their ceiling.
Yes.
But I also feel like short-term and long-term, it might lower their floor.
I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. And I think you might need to just worry about the ceiling for now, because like Jokic is different than like Fox, where it's like, I don't know if this team's going anywhere. Like Jokic is the ultimate, like you need to honor this guy. Like he's the best player in the world. You have to be making win now moves. And we've criticized them for not doing that by letting the KCP leaves. And it's just like, you have to do this. It makes more sense for them than a lot of other teams. And I think it's a reasonable question. Would you rather have Butler for 2 more years at 50 or MPJ at what, like 38 or 40? I think if you're talking ceiling, the answer is Butler. If you're talking floor, it probably is Porter, but because like Butler could just not be helpful.
I think you're right. How do the Heat view that? Where it's what they're getting back, let's say they have to take on Najee. They get a youngster that's not Christian Brown. They get that first round pick in MPJ. So, or say Najee or Saric. One of those teams, you figure out a way to send them another place. It's easier to move out Arturi or Saric. That Najee deal goes on forever.
Yeah.
It feels like, shout out to Grace Jean, who had corrected me. I said like he signed it like 2 or 3 summers ago. And it was like, no, like that happened more recently. It feels like he's been on that deal forever. So you're probably taking on Najee with MPJ. I'll just say Strother and then that first round pick. Is that enough for you to move off the stance that you were previously describing of, if we're just not getting back enough things that we like, we'll take even if not the flexibility, like the financial breathing room?
Yeah, I think it's close because like, and now the way you've set the hypothetical up, they're not taking on both of them, but the Najee and Saric deals are kind of exactly what they might be trying to avoid in taking the posture of, we'll just let them walk. And even MPJ, maybe that's money. Like it's debatable, right? Whether MPJ is like a positive value contract.
There's no way he's a positive value contract. I don't think he's net neutral or worse.
Yeah. So that would give me pause. But if it's, and if the Warriors are like, we're leaving the table, because I think you'd just rather have Kuminga, Wiggins, Gary Payton, and whatever other expiring you could get. Because then you at least no.
This is the problem, is I tend to value those because I don't think the Warriors, you're not getting, if you make a trade with the Warriors at this point and they're giving you a first round pick that spans later than 2026, I would be shocked.
Yeah.
And so the idea of getting a 2031 Denver pick is just like, I mean, Pat Riley's probably not thinking 6 years into the future, to be fair. So there's that, but I don't know, man. That's a tough one for me because you have to pay Kuminga, whose deal will in theory then go longer than MPJ's, but could you also argue that, all right, MPJ is at 38.3 next year, then 40.8. Is Kuminga just not even going to touch that average annual value? I wouldn't give Jonathan Kuminga $30 million a year right now.
I don't think so. The Warriors basically didn't. and he didn't take that. I think 30 was the number. And he's like, if the difference was between 30 and 35, I don't know about, that's weird.
He should, if 30 was on the table, he should have signed it.
He should have taken it, but that's just not how he and his camp are wired, I don't think. And again, can't blame him. Like, I think maybe he's we can't talk about Kuminga anymore. So yeah, I think that Denver deal, that's when you'd think about for sure. If you're Miami, especially if, like, as we've kind of gone through, your options are pretty limited. Otherwise, do you have, what are some other teams that we can think about here?
The Hawks, DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, who's expiring, and then they own the Kings pick this year. They have the Lakers pick this year. Is that a deal? And Atlanta would be in the tax after that deal, so you just figure out a way to shave off salary elsewhere. But as a baseline, if that's what Atlanta would be giving up, is a first round pick that's not their own. I mean, they could give up a 2029 Atlanta first, but I would argue vehemently against doing that. I want to make that clear.
Don't do that.
So you're looking at, and I would probably say they're going to give you, I would say the worst of the Kings or the Lakers pick, plus DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella, or maybe you can say the better of, I don't care, but it's one of those plus Hunter and Capella. Let's start with Atlanta, because again, I think these are just easier to tackle from. Would you, if you're Atlanta, are you thinking of, like, and by the way, because you mentioned this with Atlanta before, they do not control their next 3 draft picks. This year's a swap next year, and then 2027, the Spurs all have control over those.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be worried as Atlanta for the 5 straight years of all-star seasons DeAndre Hunter would have with the Heat. You'd feel pretty bad about that.
Well, he's been playing well this year. And they're also in a weird, is there another contract? Let's say that the Heat are only interested, like maybe you're even willing to give up both the Lakers and Kings picks for some reason. Is there another, you look at their books and it's like, who are you trying to get? Like Bogdanovich has a ton of value to you. Even Hunter might. So you're not looking at other contracts like, oh, we'll just throw it in here to get to Jimmy Butler's money. They don't have another one of those big money deals that's because of Onyeka Okongwu. That's not necessarily a deal, especially if you're trading Clint Capella, that you're going to want to flip.
Yeah, that's an interesting deal because, like, what I would say, because the Hawks don't control their next 3 drafts, you'd worry about, like, what about, we could bottom out if we do trade stuff for Butler and he leaves, or we pay him a bunch of money and he's hurt, and that turns into, like, you know, not dead money per se, but like pretty close to it. But if you're just, I mean, I really like Hunter. I think he's had a great season. If it's Hunter and Capella, it's like, all right, well, like, you know, how much worse are we? We still have Trey. They still have quite a bit. They wouldn't bottom out necessarily.
Is it because you're getting Butler and the stuff he does on ball? Would you feel better if, as Atlanta, by making it Larry Nance and Bogdanovich plus Capella and keeping Hunter?
If I can keep Hunter, I'm keeping Hunter.
So
I think
Dyson Daniels, Hunter, Zachary Reese, Shea Butler, like that's a lot of versatility on the wings.
It is, yeah. I like the fit, honestly, because like you don't want Dyson Daniels having to play make that much. Like, I mean, he's fine, but like, you don't, anyone, if it can be Trae Young running the offense and Jimmy Butler's helping and everybody else just like get in where you fit in and shoot threes and defend and be versatile, like, that's a pretty good theory of a team, honestly.
So you would prefer keeping Hunter, or basically it's keeping Hunter over Bogdanovich? Yeah,
I think so. Because Jimmy Butler can be a primary playmaker sometimes. Like, you know, if he's a second guy or runs backup units, like I guess
even though the percentages say differently, I'm just wondering, like, does that hurt their floor spacing somehow with Bogdanovich going out rather than Hunter? But conceptually it shouldn't. And now you're dealing, I mean, Bogdanovich is older and injury risk himself. So I think you're right. And I don't think, by the way, if I'm the Heat, and there probably have to be other teams involved because of the amount of contracts, I don't like Bogdanovich. Like, that's not a deal breaker for me. That's not a terrible deal. So I actually think if I'm Miami, I prefer Atlanta to Denver.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially since
I keep that first round pick is pretty valuable.
Well, but from Miami's perspective, the picks are just coming sooner, right? If you do the Atlanta deal, as opposed to we're just waiting 6 years for a Denver pick. I don't know.
Would you trade both the 2025 picks from the Kings and the Lakers to get Jimmy Butler? And let's say you even get to pick the outgoing salary that's attached to Clint Capella in that scenario.
So those will both be outside. Well, I was going to say outside the lottery. That's not a given.
The Lakers is unprotected.
Yeah.
The Kings is, I think it dropped to top 12 or 11 protection. I'll double check, but it spills out. So they get it from Sacramento. It's top 12 and then it's top 10. And then if it doesn't convey, they're going to convey a 2026 second round pick and 2027 second round pick.
Okay. That's a valuable pick. But
if the Kings trade De'Aaron Fox though, they don't send out the pick this year,
they'll keep it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would give up.
I give up both. Because the Lakers aren't going to get rid of LeBron and AD, right, this season. So what is that? Are you punting on a late lottery pick at worst?
Right. If this were last year and everybody agreed the draft sucked, I would do it in a heartbeat. I feel like the depth of this one makes me think a little harder about it.
I was listening to the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini, and he said he was having trouble like filling out his big board once you got into the late teens and 20s. And so like this is considered a very top heavy draft. And so as Atlanta, I might feel I would give up, especially if I get to pick who gets attached to Clint Capella.
Sure.
I'm giving up both those first, I think.
Yeah, I think probably so. So that might be a better deal because you're not giving them money like MPJ that maybe you do or maybe you don't want. Talking about the Heat.
The only other team, I'm trying to focus on dark horses here, and the framework would have to be just, we could talk it out, but what about Memphis?
So I guess the threshold question is, does Butler address enough of what Memphis needs, which is hard because it's been top 5 on both ends all year to justify, because that's going to have to be pretty pick heavy, right? I don't know. Like, what salaries is Miami like? Yes, we'll take those without a bunch of sweeteners.
Yeah, because you're looking at Brandon Clark. You have Marcus Smart has another year left on his deal, and they have Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero. I don't know why they want Marcus Smart. Man, yeah, it would have to be pretty pick heavy. But Memphis owns all their own picks, and also just, I know they're injured, but if you're able to include a GG Jackson or Vince, like, that's not nothing. And that would be, I know it's almost right up the Heat's alley. These guys who are super cheap that have shown utility, and maybe you could take a flyer on them and turn them into someone even better.
I wonder if, like, I don't know that I would even consider this, but the Grizzlies have the ability to put packages together that are pretty different from a lot of other teams we've talked about, which is to say, like, you could trade Zach Edey and Jalen Wells as like the principal outgoing guys. Like, you could just take our young guys that are good, because if you're the Heat, I think that has a ton of appeal because you have so much team control over like good young players. And then if you're the Grizzlies, like, we've talked about the rotation getting shorter. I think Wells would be in it no matter what in the playoffs, but Edey might not. And so if you're just trying to see, like, can we do it this year? I think you can make the case, and then maybe you're not giving up a ton of draft equity. You got to find the salary somewhere, and Miami's going to have to take salary it doesn't necessarily want. But, like, what if you built it around young guys?
So I guess what you're saying is they could have two. I'll frame it because I don't think you could give up, like, you can't give up Zach Edey unless you believe Jay Huff is it, and he can't be traded. So if you think Jay Huff and Jaren Jackson Jr., but you have to almost theoretically move Brandon Clark as well. Like, you're really stripping so I guess would Memphis do two of Vince Williams, Jalen Wells, GG Jackson? I'm assuming Jalen Wells plus one of GG and Vince Williams, let's say. A first round pick, and then Memphis is basically going to structure the filler salary as they see fit. Which, by the way, like, they might also just have to, like, they don't have a big money player
they have a Dallas problem where it's like you have to trade five players to. But
the difference between them and Dallas is deep, and Memphis is infinitely deep, apparently.
Right. Well, I wonder if I don't have it open in front of me, but would Memphis have the issue of, like, we physically cannot fill out the rest of these roster spots and stay under, like, they don't have the Dallas issue in that sense, do they?
So when you're looking at their proximity to the tax is pretty close. I think they're like 2 and change under, they're $1.8 million under. So you have to factor that in. But if you're willing to go, you could go into the tax too. I know their ownership doesn't want to hear it, but that's like, but between Marcus Smart and Brandon Clark, and if Luke Kennard waives his no trade clause, you've already gotten to 40. So, like, you're pretty close. Like, you could figure out a way to stay underneath the tax and get Butler, I would think, and fill out the roster.
Yeah, you've talked me into that being, like, kind of viable. I don't know that Memphis would do that. Memphis would have to believe a rental shot at a title this year is kind of worth it, because, like, I don't know if you want to pay Jimmy. Again, all the thing hanging over all this is, like, do you want Jimmy Butler's next 2 years? What's the end?
You have to worry about Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to get paid.
Yeah,
he's going to get paid. And so John Morant and Desmond Bane, and then Jimmy, it's short term. But now here's the thing. I think Miami does that deal I don't know. They're taking back a lot of weird money, but I think they do that deal. What if things are just so far gone and, like, Memphis doesn't have to give up a first round pick in that scenario? But you can't guarantee Butler's coming back. I think the hardest player to part with is Jalen Wells. Do you just, like, no, we have to do it?
It's funny, like, it shouldn't be this way, but Jalen Wells is such found money that it's like, wow, you know, we shouldn't have even been able to what a stroke of luck we got him anyway. So it's like a bonus. So we can trade him, you know, like, which is dumb because he actually is good and valuable, and you should go forward with guys like that. If I just based on the initial, like, parameters I set out, where it's like, if it's Edey and Wells and you're getting Butler back, you like that for this year, right? Like, that you're better this season if you do that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just thinking of like Wells is really great for a rookie and is a pretty good starter today.
I
Edie's
think
someone I don't think you can use against every playoff opponent you're going to see potentially.
I'm looking, you're right, but then I'm also thinking, well, who is like your centers at that point? Or Santi Aldama? Does he need to be included in this? And then are you making it harder on Jaren Jackson Jr. to where he's maybe not playing his optimal defensive role as much? So it's not, to me, it's less about the Edie of it all. And like, what does but I guess you could say
you are making it about Edie.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think the problem is you can't think of the deal in those terms. Like, because if you say, yeah, we're better with Jimmy Butler than Jalen Wells and Zach Edey, if we're trying to win 4 playoff series, that just isn't what we're actually talking about. You have to think about the next 2 seasons.
The more we talk about it, the more I think both teams say no to what we're outlining.
Yeah, maybe because you are still giving Miami money that it maybe doesn't want to have, at least, even though it's in like little chopped up chunks. It's still like,
what do we want? Terrible, of the deals that we mentioned, Marcus Smart, and that's so short term, it's not going to be detrimental.
Right.
It'd be funny if Memphis couldn't figure out a way to trade for Jimmy Butler because Luke Kennard invoked his implicit no trade clause. Would be one of the funniest storylines.
Do you have any other teams?
I was just going to throw a couple at you. Okay. Unless do you have something you want to throw?
No, hit me.
The Spurs.
They're a team, again, I just said, like, find me the guy that doesn't fit. The Spurs could do it, like, for sure. I just don't. Is it weird that, like, I don't know if I want Butler around Wembanyama as like it's like, this is a guy that's gotten himself traded several times, has been awesome, but is like, he's not getting them to contender status. And then if you pay him for the next couple years after this on an extension.
Yeah, the benefit the Spurs is because their most important players, with the exception of Devin Vassell, are all still on their rookie scales, is that you might have one mega expensive season with Jimmy, if that. I mean, because we're only talking about Jeremy Sohan's next deal basically on the life of Jimmy Butler's next contract.
Right.
You just don't think that Jimmy Butler is good enough to elevate them. And you think De'Aaron Fox would obviously be more preferable, but in terms of what you'd have to give up and get ability, Jimmy Butler seems a little, because they just have, between Barnes, Keldon Johnson, and Zach Collins, like those are just contracts that you don't need to have moving forward.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's like the Warriors argument is like, I don't know that he gets them to where they want to be that would justify it. Although it's such a different set of circumstances with the supporting cast on those 2 teams. I just don't understand. I don't understand why the Spurs would be like heavily motivated to go after Jimmy Butler. What's the, just because like we want to see what Wemby looks like if we can make a like semi-deep playoff run this early, well, like that.
Is that not valuable?
No, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I think that's semi-valuable, but I don't know.
If you can get Jimmy Butler because I guess Zach Collins' deals pretty, but like Keldon Johnson and Harrison Barnes, I don't think are deals that Miami would consider. Like those are rotation players. So if you can do that and it's costing you 2 non-Hawks, non-distant, like 2 protected first round picks, is that worth it? Saying, well, okay, he might be a rental, but if you're giving up 2 first round picks and maybe part of the appeal is getting off of Zach Collins too, I'd probably roll the dice.
Yeah, that makes it more enticing. And I think like if you're the Spurs, you just love to trade your own like 2027 and 28 first, because those are going to be probably.
Oh, you think?
Well, I mean, they're not going to something has gone wrong if the Spurs 27 and 28 or 26 and 27 picks are actually like in the lottery. So it'd be a bet on yourself and why wouldn't you if you're the Spurs? Yeah, I don't know why I don't like Butler in San Antonio. You make a good case. I just of all the he's not the guy to me. I don't know what he accomplishes for them that is worth what it would cost.
I think it's quick, but if you were able to, and it might be complicated, you're just giving up the Rui, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, moving Hood Schifino. I don't know if that gets you to the money. Should there be any interest from the Lakers, that's going to cost your last bullets in the first round chamber, I think.
They're like on the opposite end where I think like, yeah, probably. I think just because it's year to year for the Lakers as it is. So, or at least that isn't how they've operated, weirdly, because they have kept the powder sort of dry. I would like that a lot better than San Antonio. Because Butler would give you just another really smart player who can take the load off James as a playmaker, do all the things that and he's now, he's not going to space. And we know that like space and defense is what you need from LeBron and counterparts, generally speaking. But then I don't know. Do you still need to like tailor make a roster around LeBron? Is he good enough for that anymore?
I don't know. Jimmy Butler, is he good enough for that?
Right.
That's iffy. I guess I don't even know if those 2 first-round picks that they could give up, like, is that enough for Miami? Just say, yeah, include whatever salary you want. I guess it should be, right?
It might be. I mean, I would think about it. It'd be a lot nicer if they had D'Lo still, so you could just give more expiring salary to Miami.
I think this is a quick one, but do you see the Pacers could do it? What do you think about the Pacers?
I had not thought about the Pacers at all. So what's Indy giving up here?
I think the core tenets here are you figure out a way to do it, and you are left with Jimmy Butler, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam as the core, and then it's one of Turner or Nembhard. Maybe both is still on the roster because you have the top in salary. You have Mathurin, you have Walker, you have Nesmith, so you might be able to get there without, but it might cost you Turner. But it's the crux of it is, I think you're left with Jimmy Butler, Nembhard, Halliburton, and Siakam that's sort of the foundation of your team.
Man, so if you lose Turner, you've got quite a hole there in the middle, unless you want to have Siakam play center the whole time, which I don't think is a realistic strategy. From Miami's side of it, I guess from Indy's side, I don't think that's the move. Just like, man, you're so expensive. You've got so much money going if you keep Butler, Siakam, and Halliburton, that I just think you're just, that's not a team I feel comfortable having to operate with like a lot of minimums going forward. Like that, I don't love that.
I think you're right. The only other honorable mention maybe this would constitute the panic trade that was referenced. Do the Kings look at themselves and say, if DeRozan can be a part of this deal, and you have the Kevin Huerter money and you have Trey Lyles, and we're just talking about picks, maybe Devin Carter has to be involved, but you get Fox, Sabonis, Butler, Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis even moving forward. Does that do anything for you?
That would be the panic trade for sure. Although, like, I think if you're able to keep Keegan Murray, that's kind of a win. Why is Miami? So again, that's you're right. Like every time we go to Miami's side, it's like, well, I don't think they would do that.
Kevin Huerter only has a year left, and like we'll get up threes. And look, the Heat don't have their first round pick this year. They're not going to have it in 2027. That kind of spans the life of DeRozan's contract, and he is still I guess his aging curve is bad, but he's still someone I would think this season, it's all right. He'll help us remain competitive. And then you reevaluate, or I mean, if you're getting Kings first round picks post 2025,
that's good argument. That is enticing. Man, it's good to be back. It's good to be back where everything we say about the Kings is just like a knock.
Well, did anything that we mapped out, I think Atlanta's one and maybe Denver's, but Denver's just feels so unlikely. So Atlanta's offer would be enough of away from the core teams for us to, we're running full circle as we close out here, where you're talking about the Heat just might want to dare him to get the money off the books. I think the Atlanta scenario feels most palatable to me. And even if you included Denver's, I just don't know if you're not the Nuggets or you're not a contender. I don't know how much that team would then value Michael Porter Jr.'s deal. And so Atlanta's to me seems like if you're Miami, excuse me, seems like the best one that we laid out.
You could just check me on my bias. So if we open the field all the way back up, do you think Kuminga and Wiggins and expiring salary and a first is a better offer from Miami's perspective?
So it's basically Kuminga, Wiggins, a first versus, I'm going to say Bogdanovich and 2 firsts, and then Clint Capella's expiring money. Yeah. And both of those firsts are in 2025, though. Well, the Kings might not be. Ooh. I guess the Warriors deal is better. What pick is that, though? So, like, if it's 2026, I think it's definitely better.
Yeah. And then I think the selling points are Wiggins is someone you could trade for potentially, like, significant positive value.
That's true, too. Yeah.
And then Kuminga is whatever you think Kuminga is. Like it's the year of the pick and what you think Kuminga is are the two like pinch points here.
The thing I don't like though is because Kuminga is considered, like, all the other parts that we've kind of mentioned have been either expendable or it's just DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovich. Those are plug and play. I don't love Kuminga and Bam Adebayo together on the front line. And then are you viewing Kuminga as a wing? Yeah. In which case I don't think he's a wing. I think it's a discussion to be had. But Atlanta, Golden State, I think if you could, that's assuming Atlanta would even get involved, by the way, because Golden State's just more likely to be involved.
That's the thing is the more I think about it, the more it's fairly clear to me that the Warriors can have the best offer if they want to. And I don't want Jimmy Butler. Like they could do it.
That? If you're the Warriors, would you do that trade?
Probably not.
The first Wiggins and then it's salary.
Probably not. I don't think I would. Not for Butler.
I think it's funny.
Ask me tomorrow.
You're Kuminga pilled and I'm Andrew Wiggins pilled.
Well, I'm Kuminga pilled again. I'm occasionally. I wouldn't say at the moment I'm Kuminga pilled. I'm more Warriors aren't where they need to be with Jimmy Butler pilled, and it's not worth it to give up the outside chance that Kuminga could be good and Wiggins is very, very favorable deal. And picks. I don't like the idea of this needs to work with Butler or it's going to get ugly in a hurry. I'm not comfortable with that.
I think I'm with you. And that's just, if I was rooting for chaos, I hope it's like a Denver or an Atlanta, just like a team that would. I kind of love the fit in Atlanta though. If you're keeping Hunter with Dyson Daniels and Zachary Reese and Jalen Johnson, that's a fuck ton of versatility on the perimeter.
And I mean, you still Okongwu's your center now, so he's more versatile than Capella.
You're pretty fucking small after that, but like Clint Capella, I vacillate on him. Sometimes all right, like people are just underrating him, and it's why does he look like he's 40 on Sunday? Right. Grant, you asked us what was going to happen to the 40 minutes that you and I didn't spend talking off air.
It was
spent on Jimmy Butler. Do you have anything else, or do you want to?
No, I think we should stop this immediately. I mean, I regret nothing. Those 40 minutes were a good part of my day.
Magical.
Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Come up with more Jimmy Butler teams that we didn't, even though we did roughly half the league so far. I'm sure there are more teams willing to take on $50 million for a 35-year-old. Remember, if you haven't, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you're listening to your podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, make sure you're subscribed there. Tell your friends, word of mouth really helps. Tell your enemies. And I think that's going to cover it. Trade deadline, a little over a month away. So exciting times. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.